my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame. Cause I came to the game and I changed it to play how I like, rearranged it to my own domain. Yeah, I got what it takes.
We have now finished the second test from Bahrain, and there are a lot more headlines that have come out of this test leading up to. We are just now a little under a week away from the very first Grand Prix of the 2022 season. So let's get into those headlines that we've got coming out of this second test. So the first headline, we're going to try to go in chronological order. The first headline, I think, and for me it's one of the biggest, is Haas F1 finally announcing their second driver to pair up with Mick Schumacher. And if you guys didn't see the video that I put out last week, it is none other than Kevin Magnussen. K-Mag is back with Haas Formula One team. And this was a no-brainer for the team. If you've heard interviews from Gunther Steiner throughout the week, he said that he only talked to Kevin Magnussen. There was not another driver that was even thought of to take this next seat along with Mick Schumacher. And I, for one, I think this is a great move. And as we'll talk about a little bit later within this video, I think it may do them some very good here. I think if anything else, it gives them somebody that has experience that is going to be able to help Mick Schumacher along, help him, learn how to set up the vehicle, to set it up to the way he drives and the way he wants it to make it the fastest possible vehicle. So I think if anything, Kevin Magnussen is an absolute asset to this team, and I absolutely love the signing. And I heard a lot of people saying some really great things throughout the week when the initial signing got announced that Kevin Magnussen was coming back to Formula One. Now the next headline that we have to talk about, and I'm going to show you guys the pictures of it, is when the first day of testing started out, Mercedes introduced its quote-unquote zero pod. Now, most vehicles have side pods to their vehicles, and you can kind of tell where the engine is located within the vehicle within these side pods. And you kind of get exhaust out of these side pods, and it kind of helps with the downforce. Well, Mercedes has literally done away with the side pod. As you'll see in the picture that I'm going to post here, they went from this big, bulky, the way almost every Formula One team had gone with their initial design, which was this kind of circular side pod that would, basically force the air out to the rear wing. They have now done away with that side pod totally. And I for one, there were some questions on whether or not there was any legality to the side pod. Now, Russ Braun in Formula One came out very quickly and said, we expected, teams to really, take into account these regulations and really try to, build the best car available. And if it included, taking side pods out, that was going to be one of the things that was going to be allowed. And so they have ruled that it is totally legal for these side pods. So now it's interesting to see, and as we'll talk about towards the end of this video when we talk about the actual testing itself, is it going to help Mercedes, and is it going to make them faster? And I don't know if we necessarily potentially saw that within this last test. The real true test is going to be when we get into the first Formula One weekend. First practice, second practice, and even third practice. Then we'll kind of get an idea of whether the zero pod idea that Mercedes had is going to be a good idea, or is it going to be an idea that probably needs to go back to the shelf and they need to go back to their original side pod. The third thing that we had to deal with, and McLaren really, through no fault of their own and through nobody's fault of their own, had to go with only one test driver throughout the 3 days of testing. Daniel Ricciardo came out Thursday, said that he wasn't feeling very well, so they sat him for that whole session. They let Lando Norris run the McLaren for that first session. Then you heard the next day that he wasn't going to be able to run again, and then on Saturday they finally announced that Daniel Ricciardo ended up with COVID-19, tested positive. So he had to sit out that last day's test, and Lando Norris ended up having to run all 3 days for McLaren Now, I know that had to tire out Lando Norris by far. This was going to be a gigantic task for him to take on, to basically run a testing program for two different people, for not only himself, but for Daniel Ricciardo. Now, what does this mean for Daniel Ricciardo? Well, they're saying he should be back in time for the Grand Prix, for the Bahrain Grand Prix, but if he's not able to come back, the other bigger news to come out of that team was that they have now signed to a potential reserve role Oscar Piastri, who was the Formula 2 champion from last season. They were able to strike a deal with Alpine Racing to be able to use Oscar Piastri if they absolutely needed to, or if they had a testing test later on in the season, they would be able to use Oscar Piastri that way as well. So, do we think that Daniel Ricciardo is going to be coming back in time for the Bahrain Grand Prix, or are we going to see an Oscar Piastri, maybe a Stoffel Van Dorn, a Nick De Vries? I mean, shoot, we could even see a Pato O'Ward, who there's been tons of talk about coming over from IndyCar to Formula. Now we move on to the test results, and I'm going to show the test results here on the screen for you guys. So I think this is probably the most surprising testing that we've had in a long time. So, if you look at the very first day, Pierre Gasly leads day one with a time of 1:33.902, and he set that on the C5, which is the absolute softest of tire that Pirelli has in their lineup. And so he was able to run a 1:33.902. Then you had the two Ferraris coming second and third, and they ran their fastest laps on the C3 medium tire. So that bodes really well. And we're going to talk about predictions in another video coming up as well. But I think this bodes very well for Ferrari if they're able to run the C3 and run very competitive times to a racer that ran the C5, which is the softest tire. Now, in day one, Haas was only able to run half the day. They were only able to run in the afternoon due to cargo issues with their race cars and everything getting over to Bahrain. So, what the FIA, what Formula One, and what all the teams agreed to was to let them run, an hour or two before or after each session to kind of make up that time. Now, this is a little bit of an editorial side swing here. A lot of people were calling this that Haas was getting extra time on the track, and that, they were getting all this extra from Formula One. And I want to set the record straight. This is not extra time that they were getting. Haas was literally getting the same exact amount of time on the track as every other Formula One team had. They may have run into the same issues as some of the other teams had, and it wouldn't have allowed them to run the full, how many ever hours extra they were, or how many ever hours on top of each session that they were going to run. And I hate that people were kind of being misled in that it sounded like Haas was getting extra time on top of the 24 hours that all the teams were allowed. And that's not the case. Haas literally got the exact same amount of time. So on day one, they ran Fittipaldi only in the afternoon session. He finished dead last. But if you'll notice in the little screenshot that I've got up, he was running the prototype Pirelli tires that they're kind of testing for, next season, maybe later on in the season if they want to introduce a new tire. Now, if you look at day two, this is where the surprises continue and get ridiculous. So, leading the top of the timesheets, Kevin Magnussen runs a 1:33.207 on the C3 tire, which is the exact tire that Ferrari set their second and third place times the day before. He runs 6 laps on day 2, and is able to set the top time of the day in testing. And this, by far, I think caught everybody by surprise. Nobody was expecting a Haas team to be able to put up that kind of time, to be able to pass a Ferrari, to pass the Red Bulls, pass the Red Bull of Verstappen Stroll, Hamilton, all these guys finished below Magnussen. And so you started to hear the little rumblings of like, is this real, or is this, maybe just a glorified glory run for Magnussen at some point? Maybe, because as you get into day 3, Verstappen leads the timesheets with a 1:31.720. That's the fastest time throughout the entire 3 days worth of testing. But if you look at number two, Mick Schumacher finished with a 1:32.214, 0.05 off of Max Verstappen, ran 81 laps, and he did that time on the C4, which is the least softest of the soft tires that Pirelli offers all the teams. Then you had Leclerc, Alonso, Russell, Bottas, Tsunoda, Perez, Norris. But I think the biggest, kind of now you got to wonder is Hamilton running second to last, ran a 1:36.217 on the C5, which is the absolute softest of tires, which was 4.4 seconds off of Verstappen's time in day 3. And so now there are questions of whether or not Mercedes is going to be the team that they've been in the past and going to be able to, push for, wins and podiums and whatnot. And even Hamilton said himself, I'm going to say that we're not going to be challenging for wins right off the bat. Which we know Mercedes has tended to sandbag, and even Sainz and some of the other drivers have said, this is what Mercedes is good at. They tell you, our car sucks, and then they go and blow out everybody in the first race. So we've yet to see, and we were now just under a week away, so we get to see next week. Is that very true, or was Hamilton basically feeding us a line of bullshit? So just finishing out the testing, Mercedes ran 382 laps, AlphaTauri ran 369, Ferrari 349. McLaren brought up the tail end of this at 198 laps. But now I'm not going to completely complain about this, because Lando Norris literally ran all 198 laps of that. And that's a feat in of itself. So, after this 3 days of testing, it, I think, leaves us with more questions than answers. Is Haas truly a top-tier team now, as they were able to run, second or first place in a session and a second place in a session? Are they, potentially, going to put themselves up at the top? Is Red Bull the team to beat, or is Ferrari with their 1-2s in certain sessions, are they going to be the team to beat? So I am so excited because, as I said, Friday is the very first and second practice sessions of the first Grand Prix of the 2022 season. So guys, comment down in the comment section down below. Tell me what you guys think. What team surprised you during testing in a good way? What team surprised you in a bad way in testing? Also, tell me in the comment section down below what you guys think, who's going to be racing for McLaren this week. Is it going to be Daniel Ricciardo, or is it going to be somebody else? Guys, please like the video, share this out to all your friends and family that are Formula One fans, and subscribe to this channel if you guys are new, because there's going to be tons more Formula One content on the way. And as a matter of fact, a prediction video will be coming out later this week, so I'm absolutely excited to put out this prediction video. So guys, join me in the next video. I am signing out.
Ice in my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame, 'cause I came